the window was down. I remember it was back when a car with a clutch in it, you'd turn the key and it would go hopping if you didn't have the clutch in. And that's how I got away. I somehow got the key in the ignition, and he was kicking my face and arms through the window because it was a little car, and he was a big dude, and so he was kicking my face. My jaw was already broken, but somehow I got the thing turned over, and it just went hopping away.
Hello, welcome back to Free Indeed.
What he said.
Yeah. Hello, welcome back to Free Indeed Radio. I'm Brandon.
And I'm John.
And we're back with the interview style thing that we're doing, and just kind of getting to know John and more of his life and the testimony behind where he's been with living loud, hard, and fast in the gay lifestyle, and then the journey to grace and understanding Jesus' love for him, and then the genesis of Free Indeed. So we left off last time. You were with Gary, and and you said that he died. How did he die?
He died of AIDS.
Really?
Mm-hmm. And at the time, it was a disease that, you were pretty much guaranteed to go within 18 to 24 months. But he lived a lot longer than that. It was a difficult time because it was during President Reagan's years, and, Reagan did a lot of good things, but he didn't do everything right. He was a man and made mistakes, and so it was really hard. And then that's, of course, when the religious right was pushing on the fact that people who had that, in fact, it was the gays and the faggots that deserved it. And this was God's punishment. It was his curse. There you go with a Christian not knowing their Bible. Or anyway. So it was really a tough time. So the gay community really had to come together and harden itself against this evil world of God and Christianity.
So at that point, there was a level of self-preservation that was going on.
Tremendous amount, yeah. And when I say Christianity, I'm talking about little c, not people who actually
the religious
love Jesus.
Right.
Yeah, the religious right. There was a delightful bunch of Pharisaical sin, and but I see that from this 30,000 foot. But I knew then it was just simply a people to battle, and I was willing to go to battle against them, especially for him. But we were very blessed in the sense that he had the best doctors. He was at UCSD, and they were leading edge on treatment and care and all these other kind of things. And he had contracted a cancer that you can get, but I don't even know how, but it went away. They did radiation, which almost killed him, but it cleared away, and it was amazing. And I can tell you that I was talking to God in my own way, even though I didn't know how he really felt. It's like, well, if you're really there and you really do give a shit, then do something, because you're just standing there watching all this happen. How could you do that? Mm-hmm. That was my prayer.
Yeah.
That was my prayer.
Jesus hears those prayers too, right?
He does. Well, and let me tell you, in the Bible it says, have no doubt when you ask. Jesus himself said that. I had no doubt when I asked that I was serious about this. Mm-hmm. That was hard. I carried a pager, and we had to stop traveling at a certain point because he was getting to that point where it was really hard. So we did, and then I started carrying a pager, and the only reason for that pager was so that if something happened, they would notify me to get there right away. Mm-hmm. And I'll never forget where I was and who I was with. I was not having sex this time, but I was with a friend. and the pager went. And so I got back home, and they said, well, we need to take him to hospice because this is the end. So I followed the ambulance to a hospice in San Diego and called family, but nobody came. His family didn't come. Yet we had traveled together and been friends and all this kind of thing, right? But that's what happens when religion gets in the way of love. But my sister came. And she and I hadn't been close at all because of my lifestyle, but she still loved her brother. She lived in San Diego too, even though my family lived in San Diego at this point, and I didn't even know where they were. I didn't even know, you know. I found out later that I actually worked less than a mile from where they lived for 8 years.
Oh, wow.
Never saw them. Never had anything to do with them. So anyway, Terry came up, and oh, it's hard. It's not hard to talk about. It's hard to not cry because it was so beautiful. So she talked to him while he was lying there dying, and he accepted Jesus with her. And although we don't want a deathbed confession, you know, I was thankful for it. Mm-hmm. Even though I knew where I was, I knew where I wanted him to be. And we were fortunate enough to have the moment. So I didn't despise the moment at all.
So you weren't mad at him or anything?
No. I wanted Gary to know what I knew, that salvation was for everybody, no matter what anybody said. So I thought, well, even though it's not for me, because it was taken away, I know it's for him because he never had it. So he can have it once, and no one can take it away because he'll be gone.
Wow.
So in that room, they gave me this little plunger thing hooked to a morphine machine, and I just recorded the times, and every 10 minutes I could push it. And it was several hours, actually. And he took his last breath, and at least that's what I thought. It was really kind of freaked me out. Mm-hmm. So he died. The doctors come in, and then as I moved over to his bedside to see him one last time, his body moved, and it heaved and took one more breath, and then passed.
Wow.
Yeah. Freak
Scary.
you right out, let me tell you. Because if ever you were thinking that God was there, it was in that moment. Huh. You know, and then his body went to sleep, and it was done. So I did my usual thing, and I stuffed it down in my heart. I mean, you'd think the way I cry nowadays that I was that guy back then, but I wasn't. Around other people, I hid it all. I stuffed it down inside, and I made sure nobody could see any kind of hurt. I didn't want anybody to think that what they said actually got to me. You know, it's like, no, you don't get to have permission to hurt me.
The satisfaction.
Yeah. So, but when I got home, I cried like I've never cried before. It was the most painful crying, and it lasted for days. It was screaming and whelping, and I couldn't stop. I couldn't stop screaming. I was just such a mess. And everything was gone. But the people that I worked with, they didn't forget me. people at the Holiday Inn where I worked were all my friends. And they had taken care of me once when I was sick. They came and brought food and took care of the kids and Gary while I was down. And, you know, they were just good people. And they still, to this day, I know they love me. But they showed the hand of God. And I knew that some of them were even Christian. And it's like, okay, well, you can be your thing. I mean, they didn't necessarily believe in born-again Christianity, but they, you know, followed in the name. But so anyway, overall, that they came in and helped me to get back into life at work. And so I did, and I kept going. And I think I became even more militant, more angry, more afraid. And I certainly didn't slow down with my sex life.
I imagine, if anything, it was time to turn everything up to 11.
Yeah, I turned up the heat on that. So, you know, I wasn't an alcoholic. I didn't do drugs, but I did like drinking. You know, I mean, that's something that never bothered me. You know, in the gay world, or, you know, in a bar world, you find a lot of alcoholics, and it's really hard to find one that's not. That's what I found. Like, I actually would say, God, where's a gay guy I can fall in love with that's not a drunk?
Mm-hmm.
And that was just my experience, because I wasn't. So I could set down the bottle, I could walk away from a beer, it didn't matter. But it was hard to find that in somebody else. But you know, the things that I would do sexually to just have fun and to keep my mind occupied, to think of anything but, I don't know, that I never really went out with the thought of, I'm going to do this because I just don't want to think. And I'm going to drink so I don't want it because I don't want to think. I was always very well aware of who I was and what I was doing and why I was doing it. I had no problem with thinking about going into a dungeon situation, knowing what kind of things were going to happen, and determining before I got there what I would do, how I would do it, and how I would feel about it. So I knew, it was always just, you know, things were very pragmatic in my head.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew very many times, in fact, I would make sure that I didn't drink. Well, number one, so I could drive, but number two, because I wanted to be sober in the experience.
In control of your decisions.
Yeah, everything that happened, I wanted it to be my choice. Going to bathhouses, it was my choice about what I wanted to do, who I wanted to do, and why. So I never left with a sense of somebody using me or abusing me, and none of that stuff. You couldn't do that to me because I knew who I was. And it was pretty simple. And if you didn't like it, you could fuck off. And I was very clear about that.
Mm-hmm.
So once again, I was fortunate that, not being a big person, God gave me a tongue to use for a purpose.
Mm-hmm.
I was just using it for a different purpose at the time.
Mm-hmm.
But it was sharp, and it was good, and it got me out of trouble and kept me safe. So that's how I felt. That's what I did. And
So you said dungeon. So like what are you talking about?
well, that's when you go to a place that's dark and there's apparatus, and there might be people tied to it. Excuse me. Or
We're gonna be talking real. I'm not. If you're
oh yeah, if there's
squeamish,
children in the room, turn it off or move.
like, we're not gonna go into gross, sickening
No.
detail. But you know, there are worse things in the Bible than we're gonna talk about here. So you know, the Bible would be. You couldn't show it on HBO.
Well, we pretty much did that. If you go to the Bible and look up what they were doing, but put it in an all-male point of view, that's what we were
Well, you weren't
doing.
sacrificing your children in pagan sex rituals.
Not quite, though we probably could have gotten there without any trouble. It was very weird. And most of the people there were on drugs, so that they were out of their minds, or not in control. And the ones that were in control were so deep into their own sense of controlling that it would just get really weird. But to me, it wasn't weird. I mean, I'm like, okay, I'll whip you. There was somebody up on a cross and, naked and tied up to a cross, and you did what you want to them, and they didn't have a choice. Hanging from chain and rope and slings and, on the ground or in a dog cage with a dog in the cage. And, all of these things they happen, and that's what I got into. And mind you, yes, I was into porn, just because that's kind of how...
To filming it or watching it?
Yes. Mm-hmm. So, being so heavily into it, it was always something where I didn't know this, but, I kept wanting more. I kind of started figuring that out on my own, though. I realized, oh my gosh, this whole porn thing is just really taking its toll on my body and my mind. And so, and it was a number of years later, but I did get myself out of it. It's like, I am bored with this. I'm done with it. And
was it hard to get out of?
No, not for me, because I decided I didn't want it. It was no longer a fascination to me. And that can be for anybody. The only reason people stay in it is because they still want the fascination. They want the excitement. I was done with it. Even though it was all video cassette world, it was turning over to disc. But
I mean, like, it's for a lot of people who are in the filming of porn, it's hard for them to get away because of their handlers and because of people who chase them down and threaten them and stuff like that.
Well, I was far enough away from it that I didn't stay close enough to that part to be that deep. I would write really, really, really filthy erotica. And people just say, oh, you should be a writer. This is so good. You would not agree with that if you read it today. You go, oh my God, what is that? I can't even look. It'll melt your eyes. So that's what I was into. But again, I did it with a clear mind, and I knew what I was going to do and why I was going to do it. But I also knew that everything about my world was driven by sex, and I enjoyed it, and I wanted other people to stay out of my way and not tell me what I could or couldn't do based on who I wanted to sleep with, So, yeah, that's just part of, the darkness. I mean, it was a lot of it, and yet at the same time, now looking back, I know that God was with me. He went to those parties with me. He went on those vacations, and he saw me doing the things that I was doing. And, when I got into fetish wear and things like that, because I used to wear rubber and leather, and that's just a whole nother world and a whole nother party.
A lot of baby powder.
Yeah, and lube. But that's, and it's celebrated in San Francisco and other cities. There's festivals that are around that are on the streets, and, like Folsom Street Fair, and that is all about the leather and the sort of the darker side of the gay community, not the drag queens and all that. These are the manly men that are into really dark stuff,
So, like, how deep does that rabbit hole go? Like, how...
To death.
How dark is it?
It could get pretty bad. I mean, you could kill somebody with what we do and what we did. Easily.
Really?
A lot of people end up in the hospital. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was dangerous. But when you're on that many drugs, who cares? I wasn't on drugs. I did it knowing what I was doing, but I knew that person was there, so that's what I did.
Mm-hmm.
So I had my reasons for being there, and I would travel to them, and I had a friend that he and I traveled to there. We were just buddies, but that was just part of the darkness. I'm only describing all of these darker things. There was still good life in there, where I went to work and traveled, and I had my kids,
And went to sex dungeons on the weekends.
or that night or whenever. And it could be at the bar too. It didn't have to be anything particularly special. It could be happening at the bar if you went to the right one, at the right time. So that was just part of life. That was getting into the real depths of the darkness of that whole lifestyle.
So did you ever
They don't talk
experiment
about.
with drugs at all?
Oh yeah, I did with ecstasy a number of years ago. Loved that. Oh my goodness. That was one of those, why can't we have this drugs? Because I wasn't a drug person. I've never even smoked pot. I didn't care. I didn't want to. I had nothing to do with it. But ecstasy was introduced to me by actually a person that was graduating high school. So, an 18-year-old. So, okay, there we go. And it was fun, and it, again, connected to sex. Everything was. So that went on for a little while. And then much later in life, which was very strange, just before as I was learning this message of grace, I had actually decided to try crack with that same friend, now a number of years later.
Was it the friend who introduced you to ecstasy?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, but we had a good life. We enjoyed each other, and, he considered himself straight, but we played for years, and I had my own life outside of that and everything too. So it was just a constant stream of sex and stuff.
How prevalent are drugs in the mainstream gay lifestyle?
Very prevalent. You won't hear them say that on TV. Nobody wants to admit that. But if you go to the places where...
Any more than just your average Joe, or?
I think so, because there is a greater need for escape. And because, you see, a part of that too is because being gay isn't allowed to be out on the street, especially, as I was growing up, then it was pushed into the underground, if you will, or into buildings and where you would hide. So, and if you wanted to be there for a long time, then drugs was the way to stay there and stay in a state of mind that you didn't have to connect with whatever was going on, happening to you, with you, for you, by you, whatever. So it's just, it's sad, but it's very true. It's just a heavy drug and alcohol world, and you can't help it. And although I don't put that on anybody, it's just reality. And if somebody doesn't like what I'm saying about that, oh well, I've been there, done that. I know it's true. I could go into a bar today and find the same thing. I can pick out the tweaker, tell you what he's into just by looking. It's easy. You go to a bathhouse, they're everywhere. And it's sad. It's tough. And I used to get really pissed because there would be so many guys on these drugs, they couldn't do anything. It's like, you can't even get hard. Why do I want to play with you? What's the point? If I wanted that, I would be with a girl. If I wanted nothing there, I'd be with a woman. And so that was never my cup of tea. It just, ugh. So again, I like staying clear-headed. I did go out, obviously. There were many, many times where I would drink and go and have sex with people, and thought it was fantastic until you woke up and went, who are you? Because I don't remember. There's plenty of that too, but it was the good times.
Is there like a big push to be super promiscuous, or is it just kind of do what you want?
It's a do what you want kind of thing. Promiscuity just comes anyway. And I actually, because I had been married and understood some of God's law, that's why I could look at this and go, okay, I know why you do this, because there's nothing that's on a moral side that directs you into a place where there's a sense of permanence or becoming one with somebody. There, two of the same gender cannot make love and become one like a man and a woman can. It's just completely different. And if you don't know the Lord, then you won't understand any of that, and you can go off and have a fit.
Well, and I bet you probably tried.
I did.
I bet you tried to connect those dots with.
Very much so. I always hated the religious people. Well, the parts don't fit. Well, I'll show you the other way around, because I can make it fit.
Mm-hmm.
And it looks fine and it feels fine. But, rebelling against all of the things that people would say about us was part of doing everything that they said I couldn't do. Every religious comment and that is still said today, God made Adam and Eve, not Adam and Steve. Well, you know what? Let me show you. Steve and I fell in love, literally. Hi, Steve. And so we made a life together. Gary and I fell in love. We had a real deep connection and a life together. But I knew that I still wasn't, this is later, and when I look back and I said, I still wasn't able to really connect with him like Katie. There wasn't that becoming one flesh. It does not happen. So without anything there, without any boundaries or rules or anything, it's just a free-for-all. Just, you scatter it to the wind. Mm-hmm. And so it's partially, it's very accepted, partially expected, and nobody judges you for it. We call each other names, but that's because everybody's calling each other the same name, slut, whore, whatever you want to call it, pig, I don't care. Yep. And the more I was that, the happier I felt. To the point where I had a nickname in a town, and that's how I was known in a big city. So you could say the nickname, and people would know who I was. And they'd never met me, they just heard of me. So that's a lot of sex, especially the one thing I was popular for. Mm-hmm. I'm not being proud of it. It's just I look at it and go, "Wow."
If you had to sit
How
down,
did you manage that?
If you had to sit down and do the math, how many partners do you think that you connected with?
You mean how many? You say partner as if it's going to be the two of us and we're going to do this thing.
Encounters.
No, it was just an encounter with maybe an erection through a hole in the wall, and I don't know. It's thousands, easily. Oh my gosh, yes, yes.
Was that a fairly common?
I don't know. Probably. With some people, not everybody was like that.
Sure.
Some people wanted to get married and have their one person, or then you find out actually that there's a lot more than just one person in the two people's lives. But not everybody was rampantly insane like I was. Not by any means.
So you were like a special brand of.
Well, I was just one of those guys. I was just out more and looking for more of that than maybe some other people. But the people that I met obviously said yes. So had that come along for them, 3, 4, 5, 10,000 times, they would have said yes to it. So it's kind of a weird thing to say, were people like that? I can't really say that. I just say that it was okay, because that's part of how we meet and what we do.
Yeah. So when did things start to change for you? Like when did Jesus start becoming more of a positive part in your life?
I would be after Steve and I broke up, and I don't know when that was. I don't know if you remember, Steve, but that was really hard. But I still loved him and wanted to see life be good for him, but it was a tough time. He had an serious alcohol problem, and he admits it, but he's got sober, and I've been along with him on that.
Oh, that's good.
And it's just been wonderful to see. I'm just so proud of him. And I know he doesn't agree with my stances nowadays, but that's okay, because we're both alive and doing well. And I know that God has him in his hands. So I guess I moved to Sacramento, and I started thinking about God.
Just one day?
Just, yeah, out of the blue. And I watched a program. I thought, oh, that guy sounds really nice. He doesn't sound like the judgy, asshole preachers on the rest of the TV.
Who was that?
It was actually Joel Osteen. So I got a good, uplift. But I realized it wasn't doing anything for me. It just made me feel good. Well, anybody could do that if I trusted them enough. And they did. So that wasn't really quite enough of anything. So I kind of let it go and didn't really care. But I know that I began to talk to my kids, especially my son, about what had happened in life, and to apologize and want to be with him. And it was really hard, but I knew that that was part of what God would want me to do. So I guess that was my first step into trying to do something else. Life had run its course, and I wasn't dead or anything like that, but inside I was finally alone, and I had time to look and see who was standing there and what did he want for the rest of life. It was just weird. So anyway, that was kind of that I guess was the beginning. But then I moved back to San Diego, and I didn't go out to the bars. I saw people that I knew, but I knew that if I stayed there, I wouldn't change, that I would be right back into I knew the whole city, right? So I knew if I stayed where I was, that I was going to stay where I was. And next thing I know, I was invited by my brother to move out to Denver. I thought, well, here's my chance to get away. Here's my chance to try to be something else. And so I did. I didn't have any obligations, so I quit what I was doing, packed up my stuff in a U-Haul, and moved with my friend out to Denver.
Did you face any opposition, like
when?
Well, like when you started coming back towards God? I remember you telling me about someone who almost broke your jaw or something like that.
Oh, that when I was left out in the field, the guy was trying to kill me. That was way back when I was in Eugene. I guess I was in the separation mode from Katie. It hadn't been long after I had separated from her, so that would have been in the mid '80s, somewhere there. Yeah, and that was a guy who picked me up at the bar. And then we went out to this field.
Because you were cross-dressing, right?
No. When I was doing that, I was always safe. I never had a problem when I was in drag and going out and picking up men. See, once again, the transgender thing, they called it transsexuals back then. I would have easily been taken over that waterfall, because I was doing that, and I was out picking up men and having a really good time, and they'd buy me drinks all night, and my friend too, a female, my dear friend, and so we just had fun. And I was just the supreme slut of the bar. I gave women a really bad name because, yeah, it was, come on, let's go to your car and then come back and continue with the night. But so that was then, and the broken jaw came on its own. I think it came, I don't know, somewhere before or after that, but maybe after that, when the guy was trying to kill me. And once again, I know God was with me, got me back into my car, because he had walked me a long ways from the car. And then when I was kneeling in front of him, he hit me so hard, it just sent me spinning. Fortunately, I think, he punched me in the direction that it turned my head toward the car, and my body just got up and ran. And the window was down. I remember it was back when a car with a clutch in it, you'd turn the key and it would go hopping if you didn't have the clutch in. And that's how I got away. I somehow got the key in the ignition, and he was kicking my face and arms through the window, because it was a little car, and he was a big dude, and so he was kicking my face. My jaw was already broken, but somehow I got the thing turned over, and it just went hopping away. And that was part of what set the fear into my life. Part of it. I remember not I wouldn't go near a window. I wouldn't ever be in a situation where someone could get me.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that stays with you. You know, I had a few close calls like that, not broken like that. This is the only time I was ever broken or beaten. But just being in the wrong place
At the wrong time.
Oh man. So yeah, those were those times in.
Was that before or after
Oregon.
the funeral?
That was after, because I wasn't part of their life at that time. Well, it might have been before actually, because I moved to San Diego and then heard about that years later.
I don't think we covered that in the last video.
No, my family having a funeral for me at a Pentecostal church, because they had said, you know, if you're not going to change, we don't want anything to do with you, and all of those other things. So then this came about, and my sister had actually told me about it years later. I'm like, well, that's fine, because I don't have a relationship with him anyway, so who cares? You know, it's not like I was there.
Was that like in response to the divorce, or?
Just to everything, you know, I was just not going to be their son anymore, and that was somehow a good thing. So, you know, I don't know.
I think that that's an important detail for where the story goes after that, because so you were in Denver for a while with
Well, the funeral was long before that.
right, it was long before that, but we just left the main trail of the story with you were in Denver.
Mm-hmm.
You were just headed to Denver from San Diego.
Right.
So and that was with who did you move to Denver with?
That was with a young man that I knew in San Diego.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're in.
He was a friend of mine.
You're in Denver.
Moved in my brother's house because they invited us, and we had taken a pre-trip to out there and got it all arranged, and then 2 months maybe, all of a sudden my brother comes down and tells me that his wife doesn't want us there anymore, so we have to leave in the morning. This was 10 o'clock at night on a Sunday night. So that Monday morning we had to get into my Mustang and go.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm driving a Mustang that's dropped to the ground, living in this state I don't know anything about, and getting ready for one of their biggest storms of the, you know, in 10 or 15 years or 20 years, something like that. I didn't know what to expect, but so we found a place. We had to stay in a hotel for a few nights, and we found somebody who would rent to us and let us get into a place quickly, so we weren't on the street, because we didn't have money to be staying in a hotel. But you know, that hurt. That was really painful. Here's the person who invited me there now putting me out on the street. So it was just the same thing over and over again. It just didn't seem to matter. And I thought, well, I'm trying to do this right, but it doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter. But at that point, I had really decided that I wanted God to be important in my life. I wanted to have a relationship with Him that nobody else could touch.
Well, that's a pretty stark view change from, I mean, just kind of on a dime. Like, was there anything that led up to that? Or?
Nope. I just wanted it.
Even if He didn't want you?
Suddenly, there wasn't that thought anymore. It was, I'm going to have a relationship with God, period. And I didn't care about anybody else's feelings, and I didn't care to tell anybody. Nobody had to know. It was none of anybody's business. That's what I wanted. My heart said, come to Jesus. And I kept remembering how happy I was when I was 16 to 22 or 3 or 4, and how amazing it was, and that was the truth. Everything else was a lie. The heck with those people. And I remember that, I know that was a big point, because that the removal from the house happened in October, and on Thanksgiving I accepted their invitation to go back. And I told the Lord that I forgave them, even though they couldn't accept forgiveness necessarily or anything like that. I knew that if I forgave them with God, that He was going to take care of the situation.
Wow.
And people thought I was absolutely insane. My kids especially. It's like, Dad, why would you go back to their house? They hate you. F them. I'm like, no, that's not the right way to do it. God wants me to forgive them, and I'm going to do it, and I'm going to learn what forgiveness feels like, what it means, because it had nothing to do with them. They didn't care if I forgave them. You know, it was just, we can't leave you out for Thanksgiving.
Sure.
So, so I did, and I went back.
Well, and that's a big deal, because if anyone had a reason or a right to hate God, it was you at that point, from all the hand over fist rejection that had been served to you over and over and over again.
Yeah, and it wasn't done. I mean, you know, there would be more, and I would hear about it and read about it and see it on TV, and you know, the frustration and the anger would still be there.
With you personally, or like just gays in general?
Just in general. You know, I would watch the gay community being tormented and destroyed, and all I could think was, this is not right, because they're people, and there's a God, and this is wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't have it in my mind to do anything about it. It was just, for me, it was wrong. But I also still continued, interestingly enough, I continued having sex with guys, obviously with guys. But I never went to a bar. Never. I didn't even know where the gay bars were. I remember just before I moved from there.
In Denver?
In Denver. I actually drove up to one to drop somebody off, but I had no idea where. Like, I could not tell you where it is today. I couldn't find it.
Mm-hmm.
So I never went there. I didn't want anything to do with the lifestyle. But I would meet guys along the way, all of them straight, all of them either married or with girlfriends that just liked what I was able to do for them. And we became friends. And so it was just part of the friendship, you know. We're coming over for dinner, watch the football game, and then we're gonna do this, and then we're gonna keep going with our night. And that's just the way it was.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, I knew that God was getting a hold of my heart. Even though I didn't think of it that way, I just knew that I wanted to do something, and I needed to do something that was going to catch, that was going to take traction, you know, and lead me the right way. So I started trying churches.
Mm-hmm.
And I was a disaster on wheels. You know, here was hypocrititis. But I really wasn't a hypocrite, because I knew who I was and I was living my way. So I wasn't pretending. I was just here to see what I could find.
Mm-hmm.
And I found the churches that were all about the magnificence of their production and themselves, you know, and I found it offensive and disgusting. And then I found the little ridicule you church, and it's like, oh, I'm not going to stand here in front of this guy. He's an idiot. But then I found a place that I could stay and that I could enjoy. And I didn't have to tell anybody who I was or what I was. You know, they invited me to their home groups, and I would go to their men's groups. But they didn't ever know me, you know. But there was one man who was kind to me. And I used to love watching him worship, because it didn't matter what anybody would say.
Mm-hmm.
He'd get down on his hands and knees and fall on his face before the Lord during worship in that church. And I remember thinking, what a beautiful, beautiful man. I can trust him.
Mm-hmm.
And it was funny, wherever I went to church, this is for real, I would always sit on the end and kind of, you know, maybe 3 or 4 rows back. That was just because I liked to be up close or whatever, just for my own benefit. But nobody ever sat in a row next to me. The row was always empty. I don't care if I moved, the row would be empty. And I know that what would happen is, in my head, I would think, if I were to die right now, just have a heart attack in this pew, in this seat, because they were just chairs, nobody would know who that guy is. And they probably wouldn't come check on me until they realized something was wrong. Because nobody cared. Nobody talked to me. Nothing. So it was just typical church, all where I went, just churchianity for days. But instead of letting that be my view of God, I let God show me his view of me. And that's what really changed.
Mm-hmm.
So the people weren't important. I didn't care. And I really didn't. I wanted to care, but I didn't. wasn't going to let them decide anything for me. I saw the production. I saw all of these things, like I said. And I didn't want anything to do with it. It's like, I just want somebody to tell me they love Jesus and prove it. What is wrong with you people? I'm in the room now. Love me. I dare you. I freaking dare you to love me. And I was militant about that because I was good at being militant. But in my heart, it was this deep want of not their approval. I don't give a shit about your approval. You can save that. Prove your love, your approval of Christ in your life by loving me. And then ask me a question, see if you can handle it. So that's one thing about me. If you ask me something, I'm brutally honest. If you don't really want the answer, don't ask, because I'm going to tell you the way it is. Now, God softened that quite a bit, but that's how I came through all of this. I came through with the same tenacity and drive and passion as I lived for the passion and drive to be a militant gay man. Well, I'll tell you, one day, now mind you, I'm getting back with the Lord, but I still have my friends. And that kind of bothered me, but kind of not, because I'm like, well, I had resigned the fact that this is not going to go away. So, there's going to be a dude every now and then, and God's going to have to just deal with it, But I didn't want to put him in that position. It's like, I'm sorry I'm doing this. Please don't look, because I can't stop, and you got to know that.
Yeah.
So please be bigger than me. That's really how I felt. But then I decided to try crack. Because it just looked so fun.
Crack cocaine!
Yeah! And I never went to powdered cocaine. I didn't, it was never a fascination. I'm like, I'm not breathing that up my nose. It'll burn, and then I'll hate life and hate you, and I'm not going to do that. That does not sound like a party. But I tried the stuff, and of course, matched up with sex, grouped with sex. It was good. And wow. I admit it was fun. But then it got to the point where on a night or two where I'd be alone and be like, oh, well, I should just get some of that and just spend the night with that, and not have anything to do, put on porn and run around naked and waste the night.
Just waste the night away.
Wasted. But man, high as a kite and loving it. But I used to pray. Believe it or not, I used to ask God to help me, because I knew that I was doing that because there was something happening in me, and it was drawing me to Him. But then this came along to try to,
well, yeah, I mean,
exit ramp me.
Satan had a foothold in your head all your life, and he wasn't about to lose that.
No, and
like,
that
drugs. Try
that
this.
drug was in front of me, and I watched my friends do it for years, and they just had so much fun, and I had fun with them when they were on it. So I thought, well, it must be fun if I try it, even though I don't like drugs. So anyway, so then I got to the point where I was like, I would pray over the drugs, and not so that they'd be a better high and that God would bless them, none of this stuff, but just so that I wouldn't die, that it wouldn't have some sort of chemical in there that would kill me. And it didn't.
That's how big we believe God is.
I did. Seriously, I asked Him.
He comes right to where we are and answers us in what we know. God, I don't know what else to ask for, but just keep me from dying while I do these drugs. And I
Help me.
firmly believe that God is totally that big. And not to interject too much, but that was a message that changed my life. Because I used to think that when I was addicted to porn, that God looked away from me while I was, in the middle of it. And He was like, it's okay, I'm here, but I'll wait till you finish, because I can't look at you.
That's what you thought.
That's what I thought. And then having that blown out of the water changed my life. Because then I understood that God wasn't ashamed of me or offended by me. He was a big boy God he lived through, all of our time in existence and seen much, much worse things and stayed with people through worse things. So, getting off to porn probably wasn't that not that big of a deal. I mean, it was still sin, it was hurting me, but he wasn't offended by me. And we can ask him, you know, like, proclaim, I am the righteousness of God in Christ. Like,
well, that was that's what I did. Well, and the Bible says in your time of need to call out, right? He's there. He's your ever-present friend in time of need.
Mm-hmm.
That's what he said. That's what he had written down. So that was my time of need, and he was present with me.
I remember you telling me about when you would take the exit to go to your dealer's house, and then there would be just miles of traffic jam.
Oh my word. It's like, where did this come from? And for hours.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I should have been home by 6. I wouldn't get home till 9 o'clock, and it was like, this is too late to do anything because I have got to be up tomorrow.
Uh-huh.
Well,
So
that
you
didn't
go out
keep
of
me from doing it. But,
go out of your way to get the drugs. Jesus causes a traffic jam.
just horrible traffic jams every time.
To give you time to
think
and just to turn around
I could take the next exit.
and get gracious all the way there, and even come down to it, still gonna smoke the crack, but Lord bless these drugs.
Well, and I had finally heard a message on TV once, and I only heard 10 minutes, and it was Joseph Prince talking about grace. And that message hit so deep and so real. It brought to life everything that I thought I ever knew and made it real. And everything in the middle became nothing. All of the hurt, all of the pain, it was still there. But it was subjugated to the grace of God. Mm-hmm. It was put down so that, yes, although it continued to have a problem with church people, I was trying, and God was teaching me, and God was loving me. Nobody else needed to love me. I didn't need anybody else's love. I knew he loved me, and that was the bottom line. It just absolutely didn't matter. So yeah, when I was finishing my time, because I wasn't into crack for that long.
Sorry, I forgot to... We filmed this with my phone, and someone called me, and I was silly enough to not put on Do Not Disturb. So, just really quick, I wanted you to tell the people what you did with the drugs in praying over them. You would pray over them.
Well, I'd pray over them and ask God to protect me and watch over me so that nothing would hurt me. And then I would quote scripture while I was doing the drugs. I would recognize who I was, even though I couldn't stop doing this thing.
What'd that look like?
Well, it looked like, I'm the righteousness of God in Christ. Because you have to hold it in long enough to really get the high. And the high was still good. Mm-hmm. You know, God didn't take that away. None of that changed in that sense. But then there was that same night, well, one of those nights, it happened very quickly. After praying over it and asking God for help, I had bought the stuff, and I was home alone, and I was getting ready to do it, and I was starting to pray that God would help me, and this voice, very clear voice in my head said, "Are you done?" And I said, "Yes. I don't want to do this."
Mm-hmm.
And he said, "Okay, then you're done." So I got rid of it, threw away the pipe and the drugs, and that was it. It was just love that said, "Are you done?"
And I love that's so important, you know, still being able to claim that we are who we are in the midst of while we're doing what we don't want to do.
Right.
You know, like...
I'm holding the mic because I took it off thinking we were done.
He took it off when we got the phone call and all that. So, and we have a whole thing on that, and you can listen to some really good sermons by like Joseph Prince, and other people on just standing in our identity. That's why I don't.
Stick with Joseph Prince.
Yeah, that's why I don't ascribe to a lot of mainstream Christian ideologies where, you know, if you act like this, then you either aren't saved or you were never saved in the first place, because saved people don't act like that.
Yeah.
You know.
But anyway.
Anywho, so I think that's a good place for us to stop right now. We have to go run and do a thing.
We have Free Indeed tonight, so we'll be back.
Yeah, we have our
Do some
meeting
more tomorrow.
our weekly Tuesday meeting.
We'll put it out.
And then we'll come back and finish this.
Yeah.
Because this is where it starts to get good. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.